What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the stream. I'm just going to wait a few minutes here and get set up on my session here. See if folks join. This is part 2 of the EOS development series I'm doing as a pleb. This is part 2, connecting the wallet to the app. So if you guys recall, and before I get started, if you like this content, consider hitting the like button, consider subscribing to this channel. So I thought what I'd do today is talk through my progress this week, or the lack thereof, and share with you guys, kind of what I've experienced as a pleb, so developing. If you're new to this series I'm making, obviously, if you guys know your boy, I haven't done a whole lot of development in my time. It's not something I'm like a regular developer or anything like that. This is just something I started to take up sort of as a hobby, and also looking to do a boot camp as I transition more to hopefully a digital nomad. So with that said, a lot to be learned. We'll go through the code and take it through step by step. I'll kind of explain what I've learned, and hopefully those that are interested can sort of what this is intended to do is just be a source for newbies, new developers who are hopefully coming into EOS and learning to develop and share what I've learned. So with that said, what you guys are looking at right now is the code for what is a smart contract on a test net in this case, and it's actually the order entry contract. It's a contract that, or the order contract, I should say. It's a contract that you can actually find in the B1 certification series. It's worth noting that a lot of the information that you'll find off the B1 website is a little bit deprecated. Nonetheless, it is helpful to, I think, go through the basic foundations that have been laid out there, because most of the smart contract, the actual smart contract structures and developments are essentially been maintained even with the new or transitions I think the community has made and where maybe we're going. So let me just make sure that this is actually updating. Okay, it's updating. So what you have here is, and I'll just go through line by line and kind of explain what we're looking at here. So what we're first going to look at is the React JavaScript app side of this demo that we're going to put together, or we've put together. So this is called the order entry React demo. And so whenever you guys see these, this type of syntax, all we mean is the way in which code is entered on the screen, right? So whenever you see a slash and an asterisk, like on line 1, that's the start of comments for code. And then you'll see an inner asterisk and a slash, and that's the end of the comment code. And so what we're looking at doing here is essentially just putting together what the intent of this app is supposed to be. In this case, we've kind of obviously have kind of a simplified version, and it's just explained this is part of the certification series. So you got that there. Give me 1 second, guys. Yeah, so lines 1 through 8 are essentially telling you, they should tell you essentially what the app's supposed to do. In this case, it's just a demo, so it's not that big of a deal. Our lines 10 through 16 are mostly imports, and what these imports are essentially are libraries, right, for our React demo app. And so we have a series of libraries from like a universal authenticator library that was developed, I believe, by Block One, and that allows for some exploit of combining the user authenticator library in our React application. The authenticator library is used to enable functionality of our wallet. Our JSON RPC enables some of the calls, our API calls to our blockchain. And then we have the standard imports, such as the import all as React from React. And then we're importing some Bootstrap support style libraries that allow for just our application to look a little bit more polished, as well as our CSS. So really these are just a bunch of includes that, again, enable our app to kind of look a little bit better than it otherwise would have looked at. And then again, just to start out here, the first three there, lines 10, 11, and 12 are mainly libraries that enable for functionality of the app, in terms of, again, interacting through the React space and making some calls. And we're going to show those today. I've actually worked through this app, made sure before we're doing this video that it's actually going to work out fine. So we set up our default state for some of the I guess objects we're going to be playing with in order to interact with the blockchain. We have an active user, which we're going to set initially to null. We have an account name that is going to be initially set up to blank. And we have a set of order items, and that's going to be set to 0. We then have defined, and I actually made this myself, as a way to troubleshoot my app. I created a function called search item, and it takes as a parameter item. And what this function is, what I've tried to set up here is a way to cycle through the active user object. I was actually having some trouble, believe it or not, guys, getting my wallet connected properly. And I think I'll tell the story later, but I made a small misspelling error. You know, the term protocol, I think I had spelled it with an A at the end there, like protocol, and we really should have been protocol. So what that ended up doing is it ended up returning a null for the protocol when the call was made. The fetch call, I think, was made to see if it could fetch an API. I can maybe show you guys that error. But anyway, I used this call to look at the actual objects within my active user and kind of help troubleshoot where the problem was, because I did reach out to the EOS developers and I didn't get much feedback. So rather than give up on it, I knew it was something stupid I was doing. I did also look at my config.ini settings. I thought for a moment that maybe the local testnet I had was not working, was not functional, but it actually turned out to be, it seems, just a silly, stupid syntax error. And I'll show you guys that. So then we have our order entry app, which is a class that extends from the React.component. And this is standard syntax for developing basically a component within a larger app. So on the left side here, guys, you can see, just kind of walk you through. This is actually in Visual Studio. So we have a source directory, so let's start at the top actually. So we have our node modules. I'm here on the top left. Hopefully you guys can see that, because I know sometimes the mouse doesn't come in, but you'll see that the top left now should be highlighted. node modules area there on the top left of the screen. The node modules is where most of our node libraries reside. A number of them. It's not really relevant for today's, I think, discussion to go over that. We'll mainly be focusing in on files within our source directory and within our subcomponents directory folder underneath the src or source directory there. So the order entry.css, all that does is it styles the what you're seeing on the screen, what you're going to be seeing on the screen. I won't go over too much of that today. I'm going to focus more on the order entry.javascript. So that's the file we're in right now. There's also a app.js, and so the way this works, the way I guess how we connect to a wallet works apparently, and some of this you're going to have to. I was actually playing with some other features here, but most of that other stuff is commented out or is not relevant. But the way this works is we define a network for our connection. It takes as really what we're defining here is our chain ID. So each of these, call it networks that we run, whether you're running a local testnet or you're connecting to Jungle or you're connecting to EOS, they will all have chain IDs. And these chain IDs basically are a way to uniquely identify each of those networks. The RPC endpoints are essentially a way to talk to that network. So the first parameter again is chain ID, which is, how is it identified uniquely among, say, thousands of chains in the world. And the second parameter, the RPC endpoints, is more about, okay, how from a node perspective. A node is just, a point. So where, if I want to talk to that chain, which I now have identified through this unique ID, how can I actually talk to it? Well, I talk to it through a node. In this case, that's facilitated through our definition of our RPC endpoint, which through the HTTPS or HTTP protocol, depending on if you're a local host, if you're running it locally, it'll most likely be a HTTP protocol, which isn't obviously secure. But if you're interacting with more of the public testnets, it's going to be an HTTPS protocol. And then you're going to have your host directory or your host address. In this case, it's jungle3cryptolliance.io and the port. And I'm going to show you guys where you find this information, because essentially what we're trying to do here is we're trying to set up a way to actually interact with the network, right? The whole goal of this Pleb series is to ultimately build an app on EOS. In order for us to do that, though, we have to crawl. So the first step is how to talk to a blockchain, right? So for today, what we're going to use as training wheels is we're going to interact with a network called the Jungle testnet. And what it does is it allows developers, such as plebs like myself, to test out our applications, and almost as a way to simulate how the application would run, how we interact with the blockchain side of the app. And it also allows us to prove out our concepts, right? So the RPC endpoints allow us to do that. So if you guys need that information, let me show you where you go for that real fast. So I'm going to flip over to my OBS, and we're going to transition quickly over to the Jungle testnet monitor. So hopefully you guys can see that on my screen. You just go to monitor3.jungletestnet.io, and there's a home page there. And what that page allows us to do is it allows us to do a couple things. One, you can actually create some keys. So you can create a public key and a private key. And what you want to do is you want to create that key pair so you can actually create an account. So you can use this public and private key to then, once you write this stuff down, you go to your create account, you enter an account name which you'll just make up, and then you take the public key that I showed in the previous step on the left there, where you went to create that EOS key pair, and you write that in to, I would just say for practice purposes, just keep the same one for owner active, and then you hit I'm not a robot. And once you do that, you've actually created a Jungle 3 on this network. You've created essentially an account on this testnet, okay? And what that allows us to do then is allows us to get some resources on that network. So one of the things you might want to do as a first step is go to your faucet and actually get some free EOS tokens, on the testnet. So obviously these don't have monetary value, but you do need some of these because even the testnets work on resources. So you can actually use the faucet to get some EOS. In this case, I use the faucet on my order contract 1 account to actually get 100 EOS tokens. And you can also use the power up, which gives you some resources, and that's important, especially if you want to send contracts. I'm going to show you guys how I kind of got around that, because that's also an issue with actually sending your contract to this network. You're going to need to make sure you have the resources accounted for, and we'll go over that next. So the account name I created here is the order contract 1, and what I then did once I set up my Jungle testnet account to play with this app I'm building is I went over to the Anchor wallet. And so what we're gonna do next, guys, before we flip back over to the actual code, is I'm gonna send you guys over to the Anchor wallet GUI I have, or the Anchor wallet desktop application. And so what this allows us to do, guys, is it allows us to actually not only talk to the EOS mainnet. So the Anchor wallet not only allows us to talk to, say, the EOS mainnet network, but it allows us to also connect to testnets. So there is a way here, if you look on this tab, and I'll kind of hover over it, there's a tab here where you see testnet. It could be shown a little bit different on your screen, but if you go to your managed blockchains and you click that, you'll get this managed available blockchains. And what you can actually do is you can add custom blockchains, okay, for something that's not even defined. So you can use this to set up, say, your local testnets, or you can use it to communicate to an existing testnet. In this case, I set up a Jungle 3 testnet, and the way you can do that, guys, is you can go to this screen here where it says add remove on the previous step, and once you click on that, it'll bring up this page. You can go on the right here where it says custom blockchain. I'm kind of toggling that right now. So if you click on custom blockchain, it'll open up this screen. You'll put in the chain ID, the name of the blockchain, the default node for this blockchain, and I'll show you guys where to find that information. You also want to check if it's a testnet. You'll want to check this last button here where it says this blockchain is a test network. where do you find, for example, the chain ID and the default node? Well, you actually find it at the Jungle testnet site, or you can also use the Cleos, I think, the get info to get this. But if you go to this Jungle 3 testnet monitor, you can find your let's see here. You can find the endpoints where it says API endpoints in the menu on the top here. And if you click on the API link, it'll prepare a list for you for these connection points. So what I did is I clicked it. You can see here there's several to choose from. I guess there's really one, the HTTPS Jungle 3 crypto lines. And it looks like 443 is my port. So if I show you guys, for example, well, that takes care of the default node for the blockchain. Let's get the chain ID. So how you're going to get the chain ID is you're going to go to the Block Explorer section on this top right of the Jungle 3 testnet, and you're going to click that, and it's going to open up actually blocks.io. And so blocks.io, similar to how we're leveraging Anchor, allows you to actually communicate to other types of testnets. So what I can do is I can scroll here, and under this tab for the network on the left here, it allows you to pick from mainnets and testnets. So in this case, I'm going to select Jungle 3 testnet, and then you'll see that there is a tab here. It's actually the third tab on the right. It's called Chain here. So if you click this chain, you'll actually see the chain ID. It's right here. So the chain ID is shown using this chain tab. You'll get the chain ID. You want to copy that and insert it into the Anchor wallet. So you can see there's quite a bit of steps, even for something simple like this. I think that one of the things I've learned in doing this exercise is EOS, as from a developer standpoint, and I do understand wholeheartedly that there's developers who are a lot more seasoned, and this would probably be trivial for them. But I just feel like there's a lot of steps, and I see those as hurdles for anybody interested in developing a basic app, just because there's so many steps to do, when I feel like a lot of this maybe could be automated in some way. Nonetheless, so we got those two pieces of information, and we put them in our Anchor wallet. So how that's going to look, guys, when you're finished, I'll just show you how mine looks so you can get a sense of what that looks like. So I'm going to cancel all of this. Let's see here. Let me see if I can actually, I don't know if it allows me to even, may not allow me to, let me see. The other thing is some of this stuff is still even when you do get it to work, it's still a little buggy. So bear with me. Let's see if we can figure this out. Manage blockchains. That's not what I want. That's not either. Manage blockchains. Well, I guess it is. I was hoping to show you guys that configuration, but somehow it doesn't allow me to actually get in there. Let me try. Let me get out, and then let me go back in maybe. Okay, so if I go here, maybe it'll allow me to edit that. So I'm going to go to Jungle 3. I'm going to click on this little gear button, and I'm going to go to Edit Blockchain just to show you guys what my details look like. So you can see the chain ID is kind of in gray, but you can, if you compare this value to what I showed you guys a moment earlier, you'll notice it matches. And then the default node, you'll notice matches. So that's pretty much how you get this to work. Then you'll want to try your connection. And I'm not sure why it sometimes is not able to connect. I also don't know why. Well, that's a story for another day. But okay, so once you make those changes, now we can head back to our EOS, our Visual Studio. And so you'll notice that, again, I have the chain ID shown here. I've copied that host and port. So all this pretty much is done in terms of the network configuration in code, and the network configuration on the wallet should all be good. So then how the actual UAL works, the user authenticator library. How it works is we basically wrap our app. If you're familiar with React applications, you'll notice the syntax there. Yes, they're called elements. And so we wrap our elements basically around the UAL provider. And so we provide as parameters the chains with the network that had been previously defined above. The authenticators, in this case for the demo, we're going to use Anchor because that's the most commonly used version for EOS. And then I'm going to provide the app name, which is the order entry app. And I also provided explicitly the network, which I don't think probably is necessary. And then within that, wrapped again within the UAL provider, I have the order entry app consumer. Where did this come from? Well, I defined a constant order entry consumer with the UAL, and as an argument, I supplied the order entry app. Now, the order entry app is essentially what our component is, right? So we're going to provide as the argument whatever our app component is to that UAL, and that's going to allow and expose that app to use and leverage the UAL for signing transactions. Finally, we're going to export this app, right, just like we would with our other React applications. So once we are done with our app.js, we can step through the rest of our order entry JavaScript. So this order entry app, again, we talked about typical React format. We have our constructor with our props, and we are able to get the states, and we're also able to define our RPC for communications, and then we bind a couple of these parameters and functions, and then we essentially define our functions for our app. So we have a place order, which is going to actually submit an order, and that's the one I'm going to focus on today. I think just in the time that it's taken us to get through this discussion so far, it probably just makes more sense to focus in on that so we're not overwhelming ourselves. So this is an asynchronous call, place order, and what it takes actually is, I should probably delete these things so it doesn't confuse people, but what it takes is it the account name, the active user, and the order item. So it actually gets that state to start things off. So we have some values to work with, some objects. The active user is the object that is of particular interest for us because of our need to basically send a transaction. So then what I do normally, because I'm a pleb and I don't know exactly all I'm doing with someone else's code. So what I did is I used the console.log and I just put a console.log that says, with the EOL implemented, this submits an order for items, and I added this order items. And so what I do is I spit that out to my console so I can make sure that essentially the data I'm getting up to this stage is valid, right? I want to make sure that I'm not passing in a null or I have some blank entries that would tell me I have a problem. And I actually did have a problem. If you guys recall, I had mentioned I had a problem before, and that problem actually was with my, see if I can show you guys that real fast. It was actually with my RPC endpoints definition here. I totally made a huge boo-boo. So where you see protocol, guys, believe it or not, I had put like an A here as opposed to an O. And just that little, believe it or not, just that little error caused, basically it prevented me from communicating to the jungle network, right? And so one other thing I'm getting from this exercise is while the tooling does seem to work, and it I guess is maybe obvious to some folks who have been developing on EOS for a long time, some of the error handling is a bit generic. So you might find yourself having to do some troubleshooting if you make like a mistake or two. I don't know, that was just my experience. It just didn't seem like it was obvious maybe where that problem was. Maybe that could have been a little bit more defined, but nonetheless, I was able to figure it out through that recursive call I made later in my actual app. So I made a recursive call, or I had a recursive function I made, and I was able to print out each of the objects and figure it out that way. So after this line 66 in my order entry JavaScript component code, I made sure that I actually had the item. And then line 67 and 7 through 72 is just a for loop. It's a version of that in JavaScript. It's a let in type function, or I guess method that's available in JavaScript. And that's something that I've been working on. I think you guys know, I think I mentioned the past couple weeks I've been working on solidifying my JavaScript skills. So here we go. I put it to work. And I was able to figure out that I had a null defined for that protocol because I misspelled protocol. But in any event, that's what that is. Line 67 through 72 is just for troubleshooting purposes. It's not really directly used in the app itself. But nonetheless, it is helpful to have those types of things as you go along in your coding development. So line 78 is a demo transaction. And what I'll probably do after I'm done with this live video is I will add the community link for the transaction syntax. So the way the EOS works, or even Jungle, when you send a transaction in your app, it's formed basically by an object, and this object sub-objects are like actions, and then the actions are defined by account, a name, and an authorization, as well as the authorizations further defined by an actor and permission. Now, one thing I'm still trying to figure out here is how to, it's probably pretty easy to do. I should have probably done it prior to me making this video, but this permission should actually be defined from my Anchor wallet login. So once the user logs in, I should have access to I would imagine, define this permission dynamically, because remember, a permission can be an owner or it can be an active. So that's something I'm going to work on in the TicTacToe app, but this gives me the tool sets anyway necessary to understand the TicTacToe app a little bit better in terms of connecting a wallet, developing some front end. So that's why this exercise, if you're going to develop on EOS, at least for the time being, until we get more tools, you're going to need to know how to create, read, update, delete records on a blockchain. And you're going to need a way to connect a wallet, because an average user is not going to be communicating with your app through a terminal, right? So that's why you're seeing a lot of effort going into understanding how this works, and it's so important. Then you have the data itself, and the data is actually what's going to be inserted into the blockchain, in this case the Jungle testnet. So what I'm going to do to make sure you guys are aware of this, for those that are going in the certification program, you probably know about the structure of the order entry or order contract, smart contract code, but essentially it has 3 different types of data within each record. It has a user ID, it has items, and it has a status. And so what I'm doing is I'm actually taking the information from the GUI that I've made in this application through a form, and I'm parsing the string, and I'm converting that into an array, because I know that in the smart contract blockchain setup I've made that's on the Jungle testnet, it is made up of a vector, sort of like an array. So if I leave it as a string, it'll probably fail the transaction. And sadly, like I said, EOS doesn't really provide you really good error handling. So if you fail at maybe formatting the data incorrectly, you may not necessarily know where you go wrong. So it may be a little bit of trial and error there. And then the status I set to pending, because this is a new order that a user is submitting. So this is all just stuff to fill up our blockchain, just to show a mastery of the material. Again, as we look to understand how we use wallets on an app. So I fill out this demo transaction. Again, you define your action, you define your data. Once you wrap all that within this object, which in this case is just called demo transaction arbitrarily, you use the try statement, and you use the await method. That active user, that object that is available to you through I believe it's the UAL, you have the ability to then sign your transaction. So the sign your transaction is actually a function, and it takes from it 2 parameters. One is the demo transaction, which is what I just defined a moment earlier. It's the actual, what you're going to be adding to the blockchain, right? What your transaction is. And then it takes this broadcast and true. So you want that broadcast out to your network. So if that succeeds, then you're fine, right? If it doesn't, you're going to get a catch, and you're going to use a catch method, and you're going to return the error through the console, and I'll show you guys that in a moment. So that, in a nutshell, guys, is how the order entry is defined. You might be wondering where this demo transaction data comes from, like where these 3 sets come from. Well, if I go back to my EOS Studio just to view the or you know what, I'll tell you what, why don't we go to, let's go to the EOS Studio first, and then I'll go to Jungle just to show you guys 2 different ways to check your data. So what you're seeing right now on the screen is a view of the order contract that I loaded on Jungle. So you can see here on the left side where it says parameters. I kind of toggled that here, parameters. There's a user ID. There's an items parameter, and there's a status parameter. So those are the three, if you guys remember, that we are working on loading into this table, right? And we can also view that and verify what we're playing with. You know, let's say this was someone else's contract. We could easily figure out what we're playing with through Jungle or through, through blocks. So if I go to my blocks.io, okay, blocks.io, and I type in where my contract is. So in this case, my contract is under the account order contract 1. So let's type that in. I'll show you guys that. Let's make sure I'm transitioned. Yeah. Okay. So order contract 1. So I type that in. I'm going to get this off of Jungle 3 testnet. So I'm at my order contract 1 account. And you can see I created this 8 hours ago. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my contract. So contract here. Actually, you could even go to tables and actions, I believe. So go to tables and actions. And then, oh, that didn't work the way I wanted it to. That's okay. Here, should come up. Okay, so here you can see I have two tables. I have an orders table and a products table. So I'm going to go to the orders table. That didn't quite update. I had thought when I put in this contract name, because that's where the contract is. Let's try it by the account. See if we can do it that way again. So contract. There we go. So you can see here under the orders table, order contract 1, I have as parameters ID, user ID, item status, total. Now if I want to show actions, and that's basically what you're doing when you're interacting with these contracts, really what you're doing is you're selecting an action. So in this case, I'm actually using the add order action. So you can see the three parameters here: user ID, items, and status. So that's just another way for you guys to work through these contracts as you create them. Is well, one, if you're coding them, you probably know what you're coding. But if you ever have a question about if it's someone else's code or you're on a team and you need to understand what the parameters are called or what data types the record types are, you know, you can do it through Jungle. You can do it through EOS Studio. There are a number of different ways to do it. I'm going to have to plug in my laptop real fast, so give me 1 second. All right, we're back. Okay, so that is all the setup. I mean, I know that's a mouthful, but that's really that's the kind of detail, believe it or not, is needed to get even this far with the app as a pleb. So you know, what I'm looking to do once again is for those that have made it this far, let me know if you've made it this far. Show me the minute section of this video. But if you have made it this far and you're interested in being a part of a guild where we're building an app on EOS, let me know. I am looking for other talented individuals to help build an app. It can't just be a one-man show, obviously, or one-man band. And a lot of VCs look for, teams. So the best way I can show that I'm actually serious about building an app is to show up. It's talk is cheap is, my attitude about things at this point in EOS. We have a lot of people that talk. I think the talking is over and it's time to get to work. So, what I'm looking to do is transition more into doing rather than talking. And so, this channel is really going to transition more into that, I think, doing. So I may offend some subscribers, but hopefully you guys bear with me. But anyway, once all that is put together, you have your contract loaded. You'll have to deploy your contract as well. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you guys remember, we went over last week how to basically configure a smart contract and what all is typically involved with doing that. You have these actions that are basically defined. You have a constructor, right, for this contract class. The structure defines the table. So a lot of that really isn't different here. In this case, they've defined a couple of those tables for records. And the type defs, we reviewed that last week. You have your actions kind of spelled out in this header file. And then you have your protected elements. So when you get to your CPP, which is your implementation file, all that pretty much looks in line with, I think, what we had reviewed last week. It's not much different. There's a require auth statement, checks the authorization to make sure that the account that's doing the updating is authorized to do it, and it's the actual contract account, right? So there's just, as you start to work with this, one of the things I am learning, one of the benefits, I guess, of EOS using C++ is that it is fairly uniform, and you get some regularity with understanding at least the contracts. So far, not too bad. We deploy this to the Jungle testnet. So you can do that through a couple different ways. One is you can do it through terminal and use the Kleos. I think it's a push statement. Or you can actually set up here in your EOS Studio. What I actually did is I set up a custom, because I think this Jungle that's shown here might be, it may not be the Jungle I'm using. So there's a couple different Jungles, and so you'll want to make sure that if you're going to use this tab, your chain ID matches the Jungle testnet you're using. In my case, I didn't want to cross my fingers that this Jungle matched, because I know it didn't. So what I did is I set up my custom API endpoint. I pointed it to Jungle 3 Crypto Lions 443. You make that connection, and you get all the information you need here. So it shows you the chain ID, the API endpoint, and I've already uploaded this contract, so I'm not going to be able to show you guys that. But essentially what you would do is you would hit, you go to your current project, you have your order contract. You want to make sure that that contract is unique in terms of its spelling. If you're going to match the account name and a contract on a public testnet. So on your local testnet, you have the option to probably name it whatever, because only you are uploading contracts to that testnet. But if you're working with a public testnet, most of the time someone's probably made an order contract account, so it's already going to be taken. So in this case, I just tweaked my contract name to be ORDR, I left out the E and I added a 1 at the end just to give it some uniqueness. And so now I'm able to interact with the testnet, the public testnet, through this method. And now I can, play with the contract through EOS Studio. So if I go to the order contract, let's go to the contract, order contract, EOS, order contract. There we go. Add order. So I can, for example, put in, like we did last week, then we just say the user ID is 0. My items, there's 1,6, and my status is pending. Okay, if I hit this, it'll process. It'll execute that transaction. There you go. So if I load up this contract, you can see it right here. It's row 14 on my data table, 1,6 pending, total is 0. So that works. So now, how do we put this and tie it all together with the app? Well, if I go back to my front end, if I go back to Visual Studio, let's do that. Visual Studio. Okay, so we're at Visual Studio now. We can run through our port 3000. We can actually spin up our React app. And so the way I'm going to do that here is I'm going to let me get out and show you guys the steps just in case anybody's curious about it. I'm going to close out of this app on Google Chrome, and then I'm going to spin this up again. So here we are in Visual Studio. I'm going to close out of this. We're going to set up a new terminal. And then I'm going to run npm start. Now, keep in mind that you might need to rebuild your node modules. You might need to even delete them, as well as your package lock.json. I've had some errors in the past with that, so if you run into errors and you need some help, I am here to try to help you with that. But nonetheless, once you get this spun up, and assuming that's all configured, you can run npm start. So I'm going to type that in the terminal down here. And again, the way you get this is you go up to your there's actually a terminal menu on your should be on the top menu bar. It's probably not visible on this screen that I'm showing, because this is only capturing the I think the app screen itself. But on the top, where you have file, edit, selection, view, go, run, there is an option there right after run that says terminal right before window. And if you click that and click new terminal, you'll get this basically this terminal. So I'm going to run npm start, click enter. It's going to do its thing. It's going to basically compile this app up. It's going to start up the scripts. And then from there, what it's going to do, guys, is it's going to start up an instance of the app locally on Chrome. So let's take a look at how that looks and see if it's going to work or not. So let's say localhost 3000. So there we go. It's actually already logged me in. So I'm going to log out just to show you guys, and I'm going to close Anchor. So this is what you guys should get just to start that demo or that certification program. If you've done it up to this point, you followed what I was saying, you'll probably get something similar to this. And so you'll see that there's two buttons. There's a connect to wallet, and there's a place order, and there's also a field to enter items. These would just be numbers that are comma separated. So pretty simple application. It's not made to be super sexy or complicated. You're really just trying to master the skill, right, of connecting an app, connecting a wallet to an app, sending a transaction. Is what you're trying to do, right? So ultimately, this ties into TicTacToe, or it ties into a reinvented Uber, right? All those kinds of things. You're going to need to have some kind of a way to send transactions through a wallet. It's a pretty core skill. So anyway, let's connect to the wallet to start with. And I think what I would do if this was something I wanted to develop more is I would add error handling to check if the user's logged in. Some of the error handling in this particular demo isn't the best, but that's just because it's pretty basic in a sense of what we're trying to do. So we'll go ahead and connect to the wallet. So I'm going to hit the connect to wallet button. And while I do that, guys, I'm also going to bring up this option here to inspect my code. So if you right click on your screen, if you're using Chrome, and you go to inspect, it'll be an option you'll have. If you right click on your screen and you go to inspect, you'll actually see an option that you can bring up that will show you, for example, what's in your console. So this is very helpful for troubleshooting code, and just for seeing if you put stubs like I do when I develop apps or do different things. It just helps you troubleshoot maybe where things are going wrong. That's how I was able to figure out that connection issue with my app. So I'm going to go ahead and hit connect to wallet. So we'll try that out. And I get this prompt that says to continue, please select an option. Anchor is the default, of course. Shout out to the Anchor guys, by the way. Gray Mass. I'm going to click Anchor. And then I'm going to get this login option. So it says scan the QR code with Anchor on another device or use the button to open it here. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit the launch Anchor option because I don't want to use my phone to do this. So go ahead and hit launch Anchor, which is going to open up my desktop wallet. So we'll go ahead and I'll show you that. So I hit the button. I'm going to open the Anchor wallet and show you guys that, what that looks like. Right now it's just doing some thinking, it looks like. Huh. I got an error actually. Let me try again. Oh, there it is. Okay. I think it's because, believe it or not, I tried to show the Anchor wallet before it was ready on OBS somehow. Not sure what happened there, but it seems to be doing its thing now. It's starting up here, so in a moment, we should get a prompt. Fingers crossed, of course. For some reason, though, I'm not seeing my screen. Oh, signing request. Wait. Not sure why that didn't work. Okay, we'll try it again. This time, though, I will let me transition back to the app first, and then I will see about showing you guys the anchor when it comes up, because there might be some kind of a issue sharing it. Okay, there we go. So what you get if you hit that button is you're going to get a prompt, and see if I can show you guys that. Transition. That's not what I want. Guess it doesn't really show you guys. Let me see. How can I do this? See if I can add it to this window. This is almost like a different prompt, I guess, so it's not going to show it to you guys. So I have to actually put it on the screen. Give me a second. Let's see, transition. Okay, so what you're going to get is something like this, where yeah, I'm not sure why it didn't do that, but okay, that's basically what you're going to see on the screen. That's what I have on my screen. It just didn't show for some reason. So you're going to get this sign-in request. You're going to hit the check box. It's the order contract. It's going to hit you for a password. Go ahead and enter your password. It'll validate the password. And when it does that, it'll actually should go back to the app, given it's actually validated you. So we'll go back to Chrome. See if that's going to work. It's a little slower for some reason with and it might just be everything I have open. So that might be it too. But it's still not updating here. Oh, there we go. Okay, so it looks like it now says I am logged in as order contract 1, which is what we wanted. So the login is successful. I did also add, if you guys see here on the right side, some troubleshooting items just to help me keep track of where the app is in the space, just to see what type of output I'm getting on the console for troubleshooting purposes. So in this case, we'll order items 4 and 5. So I'm going to enter 4 and 5 in the field for items to order. I'm going to hit the place order. I'm going to see the loading, detecting if network is required. I'm going to go ahead and hit sign manually. We'll launch the anchor. I'll open the wallet again. We're going to broadcast the transaction. So show you guys that real fast. So here's what you get now: signing request, the transaction data and the contract information. The items don't quite look represented correct on Anchor, so we may want to check that after we're done here, but it certainly does communicate with Anchor, and it should process this. So before we hit this, let's look at our table just to keep track of where things are, so we can prove that this is actually working properly. So let me use OBS, and we'll flip over to EOS Studio, and we'll go to the table. So right now we're at number 14. So obviously if I hit another add order, after I send this contract, I should be at 15. So I'll flip back over to my wallet, and I'll hit the check mark to sign the transaction. Signing. It's broadcasting. There we go. So it looks like it was successful. Now, if we go back to EOS Studio to represent this, I'm going to hit the refresh button, and I'm going to load more, and there you go. You can see 15 is shown there. But one thing that still isn't quite right is this this items. So that's something I'm going to have to look into, I think, a little bit more. I think there might be something going on there. I'm also getting a notice here that I guess when I ran the app that I showed you guys, it was actually running an older code set, so maybe that has something to do with it. But nonetheless, my code does seem to work. It is communicating with the wallet, and it is injecting records into the blockchain. And you guys can actually see this on the Jungle 3 testnet. So it's actually even there. You don't have to take my word for it. You can go to the EOS Jungle testnet and just look up my contract, and you can see the progression on the work. So in terms of next steps, I think what I'm going to do is go back to the TicTacToe challenge now. Well, I'm going to upload this challenge and, yes, get credit for this, even though there's not really credit probably from B1. But my next step is to try to work through the TicTacToe game now that I know how to interact with the wallet and sign a transaction, log in. I can create, update, delete, read data from the blockchain. Kind of gives me the basis for putting together a very rudimentary app and kind of progressing from there. And then in terms of next week, what I'm going to do is actually take a little time off from EOS development because I do have another bootcamp challenge. So it's going to be my third interview, guys, to try to get in this bootcamp thing. So I'm going to be focusing mostly on JavaScript probably over the next week to week and a half, and then I'll probably be dipping my toes back into back to EOS development thereafter. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's a little bit different than my typical videos, but if you have an interest in becoming part of the guild to develop projects, probably a project, community run that, not necessarily I would say pro bono, in a sense that, my whole idea is developing an app that has a business model. And so I've said many times that I think, in my opinion, that opportunity resides with an app that leverages EOS, but perhaps is even somewhat centralized, right? You still need to understand the nuances of running EOS and interacting with EOS to develop a solution that an average everyday pleb would be interested in. So that's kind of part of my journey here with you guys. Hope you guys enjoy this, and yeah, until next time, this is Phoenix signing off. Peace.